GunninGamerz here. Got something a little different for you today. We're going to be taking a look at the Lockheed Martin L049 Constellation by A2A, or the Connie as she's better known. I've been flying this aircraft for the past several years since it became available for prepared in 2017. And since then, we've been hard at work in our GunninGamerz community to make a very efficient checklist to fly this in your simulator. This video is going to be a tutorial for educational purposes, not necessarily for the entertainment. However, if you do find yourself being entertained, it's completely natural. It is, after all, an A2A. Now, before we begin, just a little disclaimer here. I don't own one of these aircraft in real life, and I'm not even a real-life pilot. This is, again, for the simulator version. So if you own one of these in real life or are the world-renowned expert, you might notice a few things that we do differently. Again, I've made a few small but very realistic changes to help make things more efficient in the simulator version. What I mean by that is we don't have all the access to the levers and switches and everything else, and so I'll point those things out when we go through, but this is the most realistic way of starting up this aircraft. So if you're a hands-on person like me and you want to do this realistically and not use the engineer that A2A has built in to do anything to get this thing up in the air, this is going to be a tutorial and a checklist for you. So make sure you go in the description down below and download it. It is our gift to you, and I've used this checklist for the last several years. It's been amazing, and a big shout out to our community member Strike Eagle, who took the time this past summer to go through and redo this checklist. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Just to let you guys know, I use the Logitech panels, so I'm going to be fumbling around just a tad bit too, because a lot of these buttons I'm not used to reaching out to hit. I'll do my best to show where everything is, since you may or may not be using those panels as well. And if you are using those panels, come over to our Discord, links down below, and talk to us about getting a hold of my profiles. I do have those and I share them. I've got all the buttons and switches working very nicely for the A2A Constellation with the Logitech panels using the program SpadNext. Again, come see me over in Discord. We do have it pinned in our flight channel, but we can get you helped out. So a couple other pro tips here, things you're going to find useful when flying the A2A Constellation is to hit Shift 2, 3, and 4. There's going to be a lot of information, and I think it's Shift 7, there we go, is the engine stuff. So if you're having any engine issues, you can go ahead and sort them out here. You can overhaul. You can see I've got some hours on this plane, not too terribly many. Flown it all over the world a few different times, but I have been a little bit hard on my engines, so I've got them down to fair with about 175 hours. And it's something you really got to watch out for, is over torquing these engines. And I'll point that out when we're doing our run up and stuff later on. You really got to be careful with these engines. And if you're noticing too, my engine too had a catastrophic failure, and I don't know why during a flight, but it was still running and got on the ground, and I went ahead and overhauled it. So that was a little ways back, but no accident or anything like that happened. Going back to the Shift 2, 3, and 4, this is where you're going to go ahead and load yourself up with fuel. You're going to adjust all your weights and things like that if you want to do them. You know, I run like Air Hauler 2 and some of those sort of programs, and sometimes I want to set my weight myself to match whatever it is I'm doing or hauling. But you can also choose these options here to load the aircraft with some like light, medium, and heavy as far as like how many passengers. So you can sort all that stuff out there. You can also fill your CO2, your oil and de-icer, and get all that stuff topped off right there. So very important to do. Also, you can select your fuel here. I'm just going to choose light today because we're really not going too far, but you can set that to whatever you're liking. You can obviously manually do it here as well. And then you've got some things here as far as your center of gravity and your weight. Again, if you're doing your own weight, you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping yourself balanced there so your plane's not flying all wonky. If you do these options up here, it'll automatically kind of sort it out for you. So dropping that, you can see your flight engineer can do a lot of things. He can take care of everything in the flight station. He can do the supercharger and the pressurization. I have him do the cabin pressure, and I have him do the supercharger sometimes, but sometimes I like to control that because basically he's not doing anything until 13,000 feet. Sometimes it's nice to just do that yourself, but again, it's what you decide. And then the actual station, do not, in my opinion, engage this until right before takeoff. Now, you can do all this right away from the very beginning, but I'm just warning you, he will start changing things and doing stuff. And if you're in here trying to do the same thing, everything's going to get pretty messed up. I do not like to engage this until right before takeoff because, again, I'm very hands-on. And again, A2A gives you the option to hit the auto start. So if you just bought this plane and you really just want to fly it for the first time and you want to just take off and get going, you can hit the auto start and away you go. Chances are if you're watching this video, you've maybe already done that and you're tired of doing that and now you want to learn how to fly this aircraft. So this is an option. I used it one time well after I learned how to fly it and everything got completely dickered up and I had a whole bunch of problems. I'll never do it again. I'm sure that it was, me doing stuff while the engineer was, and I just don't like to use stuff like that. I bought this A2A in order to do this stuff myself. One other quick tip is to hit the cold start. Now, whenever I load into my simulator, for some reason, my ignition is always on, even though I log out with it off. It's just always on. It's in my sim. Chances are you're not going to have that happen, but you could have other switches that are turned on when you come in. So a good thing to do is to hit the cold start, and that way you know that everything is in the cold start position and it's ready to go. Now, a little caveat to that is if you just got done flying the aircraft and it's cold outside and you had the engines warm, hitting cold start is going to put them at that outside ambient temperature, and so you might end up having issues with trying to get things going. So just be aware of that. You may not want to do that if your engines are warm in cold weather and you'd like them to stay warm. Now it's time to begin the pre-flight checklist, and the first thing I like to do is remove my yoke. I already have a yoke on my desk in front of me, so I don't feel that it's necessary to have two of them here. So I like to fly without the yoke in all my aircraft. We're going to also move that up right there because that's going to be blocking some things. You don't have to move this one up necessarily. I've never had any issue, but you may want to just put that one up as well. And that way you're not fumbling around trying to find things that are being blocked by the armrest as far as your view. So again, I'm going to do my best to hit all these buttons. I got most of these on all my hardware on my desk here, so I'm not used to reaching around in the cockpit to hit them, but I need to do that to help you. So number one is going to be the parking brake. Just make sure that thing is turned on, especially when you start getting things revved up and you're warming things up. We did a flight one time and there was a guy that didn't set his parking brake and we were all laughing hysterically when he took off across the airport and was back in the engineer's seat. Didn't realize what had happened until it was far too late. Number two is going to be over here. It's the landing gear lever. Make sure that you've got that thing in the down position. Number three is going to be the control booster levers. So you're going to find them right here. You want to make sure that thing is on and that those two guys, the aileron and the rudder booster, are also on. Right in the same vicinity is going to be step number 5, the autopilot engaging lever. So make sure that they're also in the off position there. Now, to me, the beacon should be the next thing, but I don't know. The checklist we got years ago has the beacon towards the bottom, but I'm going to go ahead and flip my beacon on. The next step is going to be the battery switch, which is step number 6. Again, I have that on my panel. You're going to find that switch right here. So flip that thing on. Everything should get powered up there. Now, this step number 7 is actually optional. You're going to find this in the Shift 3. Hit the GPU. I would imagine in real life you would always want to use this option. However, I do find it fun, since this is a simulator, to not use that an awful lot, especially when it's cold out, because I just love to try to get everything going on the batteries. Bad idea for real life, I'm sure. But anyway, optional step, hit it, use it. Step 8 is that beacon light, which I've already flipped on. And then up here is the windshield heater. So you've got the wipers right here if you need to use those in inclement weather. and your windshield heater is going to get flipped on. And then step 10, that was 9, number 10 is all the passenger signs. So the cigarette smoking switch right there, turn that on so they aren't lighting up back there. That's just weird to think that they used to do that. And the fasten seatbelt is right over there. You want to keep Heidi safe back there. I always get in the habit of doing this, even if I don't have passengers, because then you don't get rusty. Now it's time to zip back to the engineer station. We're going to look at the lower portion here. And you have got these warning test switches here, and I want to give you a funny story about this. You want to make sure to flip them up, and all your warning lights should come on. All your lights should light up back here. I've never actually had a problem with them not. And then you want to do up here, and the pilots that would be sitting up there would tell you that they're all working. If we jump up to this view here, we can see that. I want to tell you a little funny story. One time during a live stream, my door and some other things that were stuck on, and the door switch was, and I spent all kinds of time fumbling around the windows and everything else, pushing the door buttons and the shift 2 and everything else, trying to get the damn door switch off. Couldn't figure out what it was, and it was because somehow this got flipped down. So if you have a light that's staying on and it shouldn't be, come back here and check the test switch. The next part is going to be up high here, and this is going to cause some ear rape, so get ready. You're going to hit the test switch on the fire panel there, and again, that is gonna cause a little ear bleeding. That's step 12. Step 13 is the generator switches. So you're gonna find these all down here. Again, I got them on my panel. They're all down here, and you want to make sure that they are all in the off position. Now the cowl flaps are easy with this nice gang switch. You're gonna hit them and open all of them. The cowl flaps are right here, and your engineer will take care of these when you're flying. Alright, once they're all open, you can come back down here, and the next step will be step 15, which is the oil cooler switches are all set into auto, and they are all good to go. Alright, number 16 is going to be the prop RPM switches. Now, I'd recommend getting these on a button somewhere that you can access a little bit easier. I have one on my throttle quadrant, the Logitech, the middle, the one in the middle on the bottom. I use it for that. Again, got any questions about this stuff, come into our Discord. I'd be happy to help you out. But you're going to want to set a button up, not a lever, for the RPM on this plane. So you're going to basically hold that. I'm still holding it, and I'm waiting for these lights to come on right there. And let me tell you, it will feel sometimes like an eternity, like something is not working. Trust me, just keep holding it. They'll come on. Sometimes it could take 30 or 45 seconds. Okay, that probably took nearly a minute. Probably not. It felt like it, but it takes a while. So just wait for it. It will go. In fact, if you look out your window here, you will actually see them moving very, very slowly, but they are doing something. So just be patient. Step 17 is going to be the carb air levers over here. Make sure they're set to cold. Your superchargers are going to be set to low. They're right here. You want to make sure that these things are all the way down. Okay, after the superchargers here, you're going to jump over to the mixture and make sure that they're in the cutoff position. And I do have this on my throttle quadrant. I do use those, but your engineer will take care of those for you. And that leads you to number 20, which is the fuel tank cutoff levers. Now they're always open, in the open position rather. Even when I do cold start or whenever I get out of the aircraft, I put them in cutoff and I come back in, they're always in the open. But just make sure that they're open and not closed. Your cross feeds, which is the next step, step 21, is going to be down on the floor here. And you just want to make sure that they are all in the closed position for right now. Again, your engineer takes care of this, but if you want to have some fun while flying, you can take care of moving your fuel around the tanks through these levers here. The 1E2 is going to be your carb vapor returns right here, and you want to make sure they're in the normal. Again, that's where they're always at by default for me. And 23 is your fuel, oil, hydraulic, and anti-ice. So basically you're checking your 6-pack right up here to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. Here's your anti-ice, your hydraulic. You've got your oil and your fuel. Remember, your tanks probably aren't full, so you shouldn't see them in the full position, but that's where you're going to find all that information. Number 24 is the cylinder head selector switch. You want to make sure that that is in number 1. Don't really know what the difference is with that. What would happen if you had it in 2, 3, or 4? I don't think it matters. You're just monitoring your cylinder head temp, and I suppose in real life the engineer would be cycling these. And then we get to the fun stuff. Now, I know a lot of people will have their engineer take care of all this, and I definitely do once we're flying, but I like to still set this up myself on the ground. So the way this works, and it's going to be a little bit confusing, but in the further pages of our manual, we have the breakdown of how you're supposed to set these different things. So the first thing you're going to do, turn on your master right here, which is step number 25. 26, turn on the ground blower. And 27 will be either the heater or the cooler depending on outside temperature. If you're running captain of the ship, you're gonna want to pay attention to this, because if you don't have the cabin cooled in hot weather or heated in cool weather, it's gonna hurt your score. So you want to have everything nice and comfy for the passengers when they get on. It's cold outside. It's March here in Wisconsin, so we're going to turn the heater on. Now the supercharger inlet, which is number 28, is going to be in the closed position for right now. So do have those closed off. Step 29 is one that I know some folks like to skip because they want to let their engineer do that. That's probably okay. I like to still get it set up. So I'm going to kind of show you how to do that here. So first thing I like to do is check my outside air pressure. Right now we're sitting at 3005, so I'm going to go ahead and bump that right where it needs to be, and then you're going to do step 30, which is the rate of change. Now, as far as I know, this should always be set to 400 a minute. If you had this up really high or not high enough, you're going to have issues with people's ears popping and babies crying and everything else from having the pressure not changing fast enough or changing too fast. So set that to 400. I don't know if that ever moves or not. I've never really paid attention because, again, the flight engineer takes care of that, but that's what you're going to set to, is 400 feet per minute. You're going to go over here. Now this is one I have, again, a panel switch. A lot of people can't find where's the avionics switch. Hiding over here behind the radio guys, so flip that on. And another little thing I like to do when I set my altimeter back here, I usually just get in the habit of going up here from back here, and I set this one as well. And that is step 32. I kind of jumped ahead there as I go through here, but I want to show you this one here. Now the cabin pressurization, there is a chart in the back there, and I don't really get myself too up in arms about how I set this, because again, your engineer is going to do that once you get up and flying. But on that little chart that we've very conveniently put in the checklist for you, you can see that pretty much you'd leave this be until about 8,000 feet. So I'm not even sure. I'm not really going to go up in altitude today, as we're just doing a little test flight. So let's just say 15,000 or 18, whatever. We'll just say we're doing 15. You just do a roundabout. So it says on that chart 4,750. So I'm just going to put it to that setting. And again, I just get it to be a roundabout because you can't always hit it perfect. If I was doing 18,000, I could see at 20 you wanted it to be at 8,200. So again, I'm just going to kind of roundabout it. If I was doing 18, I would say maybe around 7.5. Again, I'm not the expert on this. I don't have a lot of information on it, and your engineer is going to set all this, so don't overthink it, in my opinion. If you want to know more about that, A2A does have a lot of read material and obviously an awesome community with an awesome forum, and I'm sure there's some people who can get you more versed on that. Maybe someday I'll get even more tuned in on that, but again, engineer takes care of all that for you. So it's not something I spend a lot of time with. Step 33 is the time that you want to hit your payload manager. And again, this is the time now that you would go ahead and load in your passengers, because chances are that you've already got things heated and cooled, especially if you're doing this stuff here. You've got the cabin temperature set right. This would be the time to go ahead and start loading all your people.
May I have your attention? We are about to start boarding the aircraft, so please report to the gate.
Everybody would be getting on the flight.
We are just loading up now.
I'm going to go ahead and hit unload. I'm not going to take the time to wait for everybody to get on today, but that's the point that you'd bring them on. And if you're doing captain of the ship, you want to make sure to have everything set for their comfort so that you keep that score up. And then the other things are obviously going through that fuel and the oil and all that. I do that usually earlier, the first thing I get in the plane, but this is the time to just double check that everything is good to go there. And now for the good stuff. We're gonna do an engine start. And as far as the starting order, you always start with engine number 3. I've seen some say go 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1. I do 3, 4, 2, 1. That's what we got in our list. Sometimes I do it the other way around, but just get them started and take your time. If it's cold out, it's going to be more challenging, but hopefully if it's really cold out, you did remember to dilute. I don't know if I'm going to run through that tutorial. That's a very, very easy to read thing. In our checklist, you can go through and basically once you got your engine idled down, you would then hold these switches and dilute for a certain amount of minutes. You flip these on rather, and then let it dilute. And how dilution works in these older aircraft is it injects avgas right into the oil to thin it out. And the next time you fly and get the engine hot, it burns that off so that the oil ends up thick again. But it thins it out, so you do this when you shut down. So the first thing you're going to do is reach up here and turn on your ignition. And then this is again going back to the whole IRL, the way you do things. In real life, you would only, I guess, flip one of these at a time. I have these on a switch, my Logitech switch. So I do them all at the same time and keep it simple. I do that with my B-17 as well. It's just a lot easier for me. Step 3 is to make sure that you crack the throttles about 10% open. Step 4 is to make sure those fuel pumps are on. And you've got those switches right there. I've got a button on my panel, so you can use the gang switch or whatever you want to do, but flip on the fuel pumps. The fire extinguisher is going to be right up here, and you want to select that on the engine that you're starting. And if you had a fire, and I've never seen this happen except to a friend of mine during flight, but if you had a fire, you would pull this CO2 bottle, I guess on the right side in this case for engine 3, and then over here for those ones. And listen to me on this. If it's cold out, you're going to need to prime the hell out of these engines to get them started. If it's really warm or your engines are warm, you don't want to prime too much because you will flood. But I have found in cold weather that it's better to do a whole lot more. So in this case, I'm going to jump down to step number 7 here. It says the primer switch is 2 to 5 seconds. I can tell you right now that it's going to be in cold weather, like cooler weather, 5 to 8 seconds. If it's cold weather, you're looking at 8, 10, maybe even 12. And if it's really cold, like Wisconsin, Minnesota cold, down to negative 30, negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius, you're going to want to do it for about 15, maybe even 18 seconds. It's just something you're going to have to feel out. And if you hit this right, trust me, you'll get these engines started, especially if you remembered to dilute when you shut down the last time you flew. So I have seen a lot of people really struggling with getting these engines started, and it all comes down to the priming. For normal flying, and it is again a little bit cool here today, I think we're about 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so I think that's 4 Celsius. Okay, so we're gonna hit this to get the hamster wheel turning, and I'm gonna hit the primer at the same time. Everything is spooling up. Now if it was hot outside, you'd probably want to kill this right about now, but I'm going to keep this on right through the start. And usually it'll fire up. There it goes. Okay. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is get your mixture up. And this engineer is telling you the oil pressure is okay, so that's kind of nice. look up here and make sure everything's looking good. If your oil's cold, it's definitely going to, you might get really, really high pressure. It's just a matter of letting things kind of warm up and they'll all come down. Need to let my RPMs come down there. We were a little bit high when I started it up. It's been a few months for me since I've done this, but oil pressure, everything comes down. So we're looking good there. We're gonna go ahead and just repeat the process through the next step. I do want to point out the generator is something that I've skipped over. Again, in real life, you'd want to get that generator on. I leave it off because I have a switch that does all of them, and I will do them at the end. Another thing that I will share with you, and I've had this happen in the B-17, when my batteries were really low, one time I flipped the generator switch on, and there was such a heavy load, even with the APU, that I actually caused damage, got a yellow on my generator for engine number 3 because it was under such a heavy load. So I know in real life the way things would be done, but this has just been what I've done to help me. I just leave that off, and at the very end, when all of them are running, I'll flip them all on. Go over here and find engine number 4. All the fuel pumps are already on, and we're just going to get the inertia starter going. At the same time we do that, we're going to flip down the prime. It's been pretty cold here in Wisconsin. Like I said, it's about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 4 Celsius, I think, today. So a little on the, it's actually pretty warm, but it's a little bit cool still on the engine side of things.
Oil pressure is okay.
All right, that mixture goes forward, and I gotta shut the primer off there. We'll go to engine 2. I'm just taking his word for it that the oil pressure is okay. When it's colder, I do have a lot of trouble with, like, one of my engines usually will get like kind of fouled out, and I'll have it idling around 500 RPM when the other one's at 1,000. So, you know, this is just something you'll have to keep an eye on, and hopefully I don't have too much problems. But when it's cold in the dead of winter, definitely happens quite a bit. So yeah, you can see here that the oil pressure, everything is looking in the green, looking good. So we'll flip over to number 2 and give this one, that's 1, there we go. We'll do number 2, flip that on.
Turning 2. Oil pressure okay.
That one took off on me there, so that's good. And then we'll go over and do number 1. And you'll get a lot faster at this once you do it several times. Just note that, again, I am flipping the generators on all of these. Not saying that's the way you should do it. We're gonna do a little less priming on this one and see if it starts. I kind of did about maybe what 5-6 seconds there. So let's
Turning
just
1.
dash pops off. It's not too cold out today.
Oil pressure is okay.
All right, and now I have a lever on my Logitech, so I'm gonna move them all forward. Now they're all synced up there, so that's how I do that. And go up here, flip this off. This would be the point again to flip on your generator. I've got them all on one switch. I'm gonna turn them on. Everything is looking really good. If you want to check all your volts and everything on the batteries and what everything is doing, your different generators, you can check all that right here. Lots of good information there. And we're idling just a little bit high. You want to keep all piston aircraft under 1,000. Most are between 800 and 1,000. So, and it's funny because all my throttles look like they're about the same, but this one's actually a little bit more ahead. Now, the way I have it, I have 2 levers set aside. I haven't found the need to have all 4. You can do it however you want, but I find having one side of the aircraft on one lever and another lever for the other side has been really nice. I have I have a couple of throttle quadrants, so I could have every engine have one, but I just have found that to be too much messing about. Having them split up between the two sides is really nice, so to help you turn, especially when you're trying to do like a sharper turn, which is hard on the tires. I've just found it a lot nicer to keep the two sides separate. So we're up really high there. I need to come down. Okay. Gotta be careful. You bump these things and they'll really get taken off on you. So we're gonna go ahead and let this thing warm up for a bit, and then we're gonna be jumping on to the next step, which is going through the pre-taxi and the before taxi and things like that. I guess the last thing too that I should have mentioned is the last step there, which was number 13, was to go and turn off the ground power unit. You want to let that thing go. All your generators are on, make sure they're on, and your batteries will be getting a charge. We're going to hop back up into the pilot's seat while the engines are warming up, and this is where you'll start doing your before taxi. Checking your doors and windows. You want to make sure that that switch is off right there. Sorry, the light is off. And that's where, if it's still stuck on, it's probably the test switch back there that's stuck on. Alright, so as far as your wing and tail lights, I have all these on my switch panel, so you want to get the wing and tail lights on. You want to do...
we're idling a bit low for these engines.
Oh boy. Gotta bring them up. I probably got one that's a little cold back there. It's going back. You want to jump on your transponder and get that set, and I use the GTN 650. We're doing IFR flight. I changed this to 2200, but we're gonna just leave that alone for right now. So set that stuff there.
System test okay.
Thank you. Yep. You're gonna want to flip over and do your nose light. You're gonna trim 5 degrees up, which is gonna be right here on your elevator. Get that dialed right in. So this is a good time to put on your yoke if you wish, or you can look at the other one. You want to check your controls, make sure that everything's moving, and good time to get on those rudder pedals. Try not to knock your parking brakes off. Very critical. In fact, I usually like to just double check that as well, because sometimes that does get bumped. There, it's in the off position. There it is back on. Now the emergency brake system, this one is pretty easy to do. What you're going to want to do is take a look over on the other side here. I don't usually switch the seat because what you're needing to do is right down here, but you're going to have your main brake pressure, your hydraulic brake pressure here, which is going to be about 1700 psi. And what you're going to want to do is look at the emergency one. That is sitting at 0. You're going to want to open that up and get that thing charging up. Now that is, again, an emergency system that if you have a problem on the main system, you can use the emergency system. So get that thing charged. Just give it a minute or two and it'll get up to 1700, and then you can go down here and make sure you flip that thing closed. While I'm waiting on that to do its thing, I usually like to just kind of glance over everything that I've done so far inside the checklist, just making sure everything is set. Sometimes I'll go and I'll punch in my flight plan. You'll usually have a minute or two to do that while you're waiting for this thing to come up. It'll go up to 1500 pretty quick. The last 200 takes another minute or two. Okay, while waiting for those brakes to come up, which they should be done, I noticed a little problem that we were having with our engines back here, and I'm actually very glad that it did. So I wanted to just point out we're at 1700 with the emergency brake pressure. We're going to go ahead and flip that lever off, and we'll get back here and take a look at what's going on. So you can see that I have one engine that's running away on me and another one that's about to quit. So what we need to do is bring this down a little bit, bring this guy up. Now this is where I have a little bit of a hard time, because they'll usually try to revert back to what the other one's sitting at, because I have these bound together. But I've got to get this one to come down a little bit, get back to 1000. And this one here has got to get opened up and cleared up. And then these other two need to come up too. They should be running, they're both, actually all three of these are having the same problem right now. These things are gummed up and everything is cold. And there I just had one of the engines quit. Oh no, jumped back. The one little thing I have a real problem with, sometimes I have to actually hold it. Even that doesn't always work. This is normally only happens to me in the winter time when it's cold outside. I don't normally have any of these problems the rest of the year. All right, we got everything situated there. The one or two of the engines were running kind of rough. Winter weather makes everything a lot more challenging, but I really am glad I did this video on a cooler day like this so that we can see this sort of thing. But everything should be, when your throttles are pretty much in the same position, that's at 10%. This one's at 11, so basically the same. We're running right around about the same there, so right at 1,000 RPMs. These two are a little bit off, but once everything gets warmed up, it'll all come together. The biggest thing is you want to just kind of limit your time sitting around, because that's when things are going to get gummed up. So that pretty much is where you want to be at as far as getting yourself started up, and now you can do, if you're on VATSIM or whatever you're simulating, you can get a hold of ground and get permission to taxi and all that sort of thing. You do want to test those brakes on initial roll. We're gonna have to back up here as we're sitting out in the middle of the, I mean, we don't have any pavement here in front of us. We'll start rolling back. If you're new to this, you know, flight simulation, that's the Shift P, and then Shift P to stop. I could have certainly gone back farther, but I wanted to purposely do a little bit of tight maneuvering here. So we're going to test our brakes on initial roll. Start proceeding forward. I'm going to go a little bit harder on the right side so we can make this turn. Yeah, brakes are working, everything's good. Certainly doesn't take very much to get this thing moving. Now if it's full of passengers and fuel and it's really heavy, you're going to have to give it a lot more to get it going. Okay, now we just got a nice long taxi to get out, and I will be back with you when we get out to hold short. All right, well, we just made it out to the hold short line, and we're going to start with the engine ground test. I hopefully haven't forgotten anything up till this point, but this test here, again, I still haven't got the engineer, sorry, Shift 3, I haven't got the engineer out yet. I don't recommend doing that either until you're completely done and right before takeoff, and I'll point that out again, and that way everything is set right and there's no conflicts between you and the flight engineer. Now everybody's gonna do that differently, and some people are gonna use that thing right away. Trust me, hands-on is always more awesome and more rewarding too. So number one is the suction gauge. You're gonna see that right down here. It's got to be over 4. Mine's always at 5.2. Then steps 2 and 3 are jumping back here to the brake system, and you can see, messed up my parking brake. If I pump the brakes a whole bunch like I just did right there, that dropped the main one quite a bit. So that's not one of the things you need to test, but I just wanted to point that out. If you were to have forgotten this open, you'd be doing the same to your emergency. So you want to make sure both are at 1700 and that you got this thing closed. The next part we're going to be jumping back to the engineer station for, which would be step 4. And the way we're going to do that is flipping our superchargers too high. You'll see everything come up. And you want to bring it up to 1800. Right about in there. So once you're up to 1800, you're going to put them all down, and you want to note a reduction in the manifold pressure when you do that. And everything did drop there. You can see there's a reduction, so we know everything's working in low. Bring your RPMs back down to 1100, or as close to it as you can. And that's going to get us on to step 7, which is to test the RPMs here. So you're going to use the gang switch again. I'm going to use the button on my throttle quadrant, and I got to come up a little bit here to 1100. Boy, she's finicky. You just got to get her in a roundabout. But what I do on this is I'll go down. So again, hold down here on this switch, and I do it for, I just count backwards. There we go. I hold it down for about 5 to 6 seconds, Just counting backwards in my head, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That was probably more like 8 because I was talking while I was doing it. And then you want to push it forward, and you should be counting about the same. So we'll say 8 seconds for me here, and they should come back on. So again, go up. I'm going to use the button on my throttle quadrant because it's easier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we should be getting some yellow lights. Maybe it was a little bit longer, and there it is. So everything comes back, so you know everything's working there. I usually do 5 seconds. I count 5 seconds down, holding it down, flip it, 5 seconds, comes back on. 9 is to throttle to 2200. Again, make sure your parking brake is on. I saw somebody take off across the airfield one time unintentionally, sitting in the engineer's seat. And no, it did not end well. So make sure the parking brake is on for this next step. 2200 is what you're going to go up to. And you're going to check your magnetos. So look for a drop. I do them all at the same time. So left. Get about 150 drop. Go back to both. And then right. About 150 drop. Go back to both. Again, I have a switch for that. Otherwise, you'll have to do them all here, and that's where you're going to find your magneto switches. So go to 2200. Now, this next one is a little weird because you're going to end up, and I noticed on the checklist it said 100 drop for the magnetos, 100, 150, right in there. You're going to throttle up to 2800 on step 11, and you're going to get yelled at because your flaps aren't set for takeoff. Well, we're not taking off, so you're going to notice that here in a second, but throttle up to 2800 and check takeoff power. So 2800 RPM, 46 inches on the manifold. And if it's hot outside, you're going to want to do this stuff very quickly because you don't want to overheat your engines. So we're going to go up to 28.
Flaps aren't set for takeoff, sir.
Told ya. 28, right in there. Oh. I just had my plane start taking off on me. That's a really funny thing because we just got done talking about it, and yes, my parking brake was on. It does that sometimes when it's icy, so kind of funny and something you got to watch out for. But I wanted to point something else out when we were in that high power setting, and that's why I said you got to do this very quickly because if it's slick, the plane will slide off on you sometimes. And also, when I did hit 2800, it's too slick out today. I just don't think that's very realistic, but maybe there's some limitations in the simulator. I'm just very used to whenever I do this to look out my window because you'll start seeing the ground moving. So I can't, I guess, demonstrate for you what I was trying to show you, but you're going to want to always keep those needles under that red line. If you're above that, and it's easier to do in colder weather, you're going to over torque the engines. See, I got my brakes on, I'm holding my brakes, and I'm sliding along the ground. That's full brakes right there, look at that. We're just out here scooting.
We really shouldn't push our engines this hard.
Exactly. And this is why this is a tutorial. You guys are going to learn some of the things that many of us have learned over the time, is that just because your parking brake's on, just because you got your brakes set, doesn't mean that this thing can't go sliding off. So just be careful. Unrealistically, we'll get ourselves back lined up on the runway. I'm actually very glad that happened in this video because it certainly demonstrates a point. And just to reiterate here, we've got our parking brake set there, and you can see when we throttle up. I think it's just a winter thing. I don't know. I've had this happen quite often, but you can see she just takes right off there. So you got to be really careful. Normally, I don't have this happen because I'm doing this stuff very quickly, not having to explain it, taking more time. But if you're a little slow at this, just be aware that the longer you hold that thing open, you might go for a ride. So back down to 1,000 on the RPM. We're going to jump over to the before takeoff. And again, we want to be back here for that. Again, the engineer will take care of all of this stuff for you, but I like to set all this so that I know it's set properly. But you're going to do step 1 on the before takeoff, which is cowl flaps, half open. And you can see those are right there. We've got all of them set to half open now. Prop is going to be max RPM, so you should be getting those 4 blinking lights up there when you fold these up. You're going to jump to the ground blower now, and you're going to flip that off. Get over to this menu, flip the ground blower off. You're going to do supercharger inlet open, and then jumping back to the pilot's seat, flaps are going to be set to takeoff power, so you will find that right here.
Takeoff flaps.
I've got a button for that. And then you'll notice where we added in, because I like it to be there, this is a time number 6, is to turn on your flight engineer. Now, you can do this however you want. I've explained several times why I like to do it this way, because I know everything is set. You'll still get the flight engineer coming in, and he'll be pedaling around with all kinds of different things. I kind of get offended by that, but I try not to take it like too personal. But be prepared for him to make some adjustments. But you know that if you've done it like this, you've done everything correctly, and he'll just help you get to flying. So we'll hit shift 3 and give him the pressurization, supercharger, and that station back there.
Setting up the systems.
And while he's back there doing that, it's going to take him a minute. This is a good time for you to, again, check all your stuff up here. We're going to go ahead and check our drift here, 313. You're going to want to make sure you're doing that every 15 minutes in flight before takeoff. Check the old altimeter.
Setting cow flaps.
Yeah, and there he is back there doing what he's doing. We'll go ahead and check our altimeter, 3005. Everything is still set. That's what I mean. It doesn't matter how you do what you do. Following the checklist, and he's...
Ground blower.
Oil system check.
He's turning things off that he'll end up turning right back off again.
Okay, Captain. All systems are set.
Okay, so then he gives you the go-ahead on that, and then usually by then I'm done doing all my stuff here, checking everything out up here. Once he gives me the go-ahead, then we can do our next few steps before we pull it on the runway, and that is to do number 7, which is the strobe. I've got a button for all these. The pitot heat is going to be in there as number 9. Landing lights, I missed 8. And the transponder, which again, just make sure you've got everything set there that you need to. All your radios and stuff, if you're flying on like VATSIM, you're gonna have more to do here, but for the sake of this tutorial, we've pretty much concluded how to get this thing in the air. Your engineer is now monitoring all those things back there, and you are ready to pull out onto the runway and get this bird in the air. Well, I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. I know that I had to look through various sources when I started flying this thing about 4 years ago, and there was just, it took a lot of time to learn all this, but I also really needed a good checklist, and the only way to get that was for us to make our own from what I could find, you know, piecing together some other checklists that we found. So go down in the description down below and get that, and let us know in the comments what you think. Let us know if you found it helpful. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here, like the video if you found it helpful, and join us over on twitch.tv/GunninGamerz, where you'll find us live streaming all throughout the week and doing tons of these streams. I've probably done this tutorial 20 plus times in the last 4 years on Twitch for people, and helped countless numbers of people learn how to fly this aircraft. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing in the air. If you're wondering about the rest of this, I may include that in a future video. I'd like to remind you to check out our awesome partner Discord community down below. We would love to have you join us over there. There's lots of folks that love flying the A2A aircraft, and they're always eager to do a multiplayer flight with you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Be sure to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell down below so you know when our next video goes on the channel. And lastly, I'd love to hear your comments about this aircraft, what you found helpful, and things that have worked for you. But be sure to leave me one. I hope to catch you up in the air soon, and until next time, take care.